And here we go. Good afternoon. My name is Tom Tanner from the Small Business Development Center. And we're going to talk about PPP forgiveness application made simple. The number one thing to remember about what we're talking about today, these are for loans if you have $150,000 or less. If your loan was more than $150,000 or less, what I'm going to be talking about today does not help you in any way because you have a totally different application process. All right, so the form that is available for you to use to turn in your forgiveness application is this 3508S. Again, that's an SBA form 3508S. Again, it's for $150,000 or less. Okay. The other issue is whatever bank you got your PPP loan from, you have to submit your application to them. You do not have to get your second PPP loan from the same place you got your first one, but you do have to submit your application for forgiveness to the one that you did get your loan from. A lot of lenders may have their own online application process for forgiveness. In that case there, the form is going to be used for a guide, but they still would be, they'd be asking the same questions, but they would have their own online application process to do that. And these are just the things that you would need in order to complete the process. All right, so the first thing, this is what the form looks like. Again, it's 3508S. So this is the top. The most important thing to look at if you need the application is make sure it's the revised version as of January 19th. There was a 3508S prior to that. It was a totally different application. So make sure you're using the one that says January 19th, 2021. So this part of the application is pretty simple. You fill in the your business legal name, if you have a DBA, your business address, your NAICS code, which was on the original application, which is just a code that defines what type of industry that you're in. You would make sure that you put your EIN, your social security number, whatever name was on the initial application or the number that was on the initial application, your business phone, the primary contact, and email address. All right, the second part. So for most of you, it'll be the first draw because you're not going to be applying for the second draw yet. But when you do, you just check the second draw box. For this one, you click the first draw box. All right, the SBA PPP loan number, you must have this. This is a number that the bank gave you when you got the loan. So you have to have that number. And additionally, the lender PPP loan number is a separate number. It's a different number than the SBA loan number. At least as far as I know, every bank used a separate number. So make sure those two numbers you have. The PPP loan amount, you have to know what the original amount of the PPP loan was and the exact date of the disbursement. We've had some of them kicked out because we put a date other than a disbursement date. It was a date one day after that or something, or it was a date it went into the bank account or something. Has to be the disbursement date that's written on the application, that's written on the loan papers. All right, employees at the time of loan application, this was on the original application. Employees at the time of forgiveness application, and you just put it there. This is not going to affect you from a calculation standpoint. All this is for data gathering for them. All right, so the covered period is going to start on the loan disbursement date. So your loan disbursement date should be the same period as your beginning covered period. And it goes to whatever date. So you can put any date you want to in that box, providing it's after 8 weeks and before 24 weeks of the covered period. Because as part of this process, you can pay out the funds anywhere between 8 and 24 weeks. So you just have to make sure that the dates there is after the 8 weeks and prior to the 24th. All right. So that next box is not going to matter to you. The last box, the amount of loans spent on payroll costs. If you know what you spent on payroll costs, put that number in there. If you spent all of it on payroll costs, make sure you put it all in there. Again, you had to spend at least 60% on payroll. A lot of you probably spent 100%, but if you didn't, you got to make sure you spend at least 60% of the loan amount on payroll cost. Okay. Requested loan forgiveness amount. We hope you're putting the same number as the PPP amount, loan amount, because that's the objective, is to get all of it forgiven. So unless there's an extreme circumstance and you were not able to spend 60% on payroll costs, or that you spent 60% on payroll costs, but you couldn't spend the 40% on any of the other required things such as rent or utilities, then you can only request the loan forgiveness amount of that amount. But hopefully you were able to spend 100% on the forgiveness amount. All right, so now these two boxes here, the first box basically says you complied with all the requirements in the Paycheck Protection Loan Program, which basically means you complied with the 60%. You basically did what you were supposed to. You issued it during the time period. You used it for the proper procedures, proper issues or proper expenses, etc. If that's the case, you initial it. The second box says the information provided in this application is true and correct in all material respects. And make sure you understand this. I understand that not only making a false statement to obtain forgiveness of an SBA guaranteed loan is punishable under law. And again, it's 5 years or $250,000, et cetera, et cetera. So make sure you're not signing anything false. Once you do that, you initial that box, and now you are taken to this. So basically, it's just telling you, once you submit this application, you have to maintain your records to back up what you submitted, such as your payroll records or expense records, for 3 years, because the SBA could come back someday and say, okay, 2 years and 11 months and 5 days later, they come back and go, we want to see all your paperwork that you submitted for this. So just make sure you're aware of that. So you sign it, date it, you print your name, and you put your title on there. And then this last page is basically an optional page, but you're able to fill it out if you're a veteran, what your gender is, what your race and ethnicity is. And that is the entire forgiveness application. I'm sure some of you were thinking that this was going to be a much more difficult process, but it is not. So the key is at this point is checking with your banks. And some banks, because of their doing PPP loans right now, they are not even accepting the forgiveness application. But if the fact of it is that they are taking it, you do want to take it, because you will start, this will turn into a loan 10 months after the end of your 24-week period. So once that happens, you're going to be having to start making payments on the loan. So make sure that you submit this as soon as possible. For one, is just to get it off your plate and be done with it. And again, the same thing applies to the second loan. Make sure that you submit it as soon as possible after the fact, once the banks start accepting it. So that is it, and how simple it is. And now I'm going to stop the presentation.